Good morning, Miss. Good morning to my esteemed classmates. My name is Miss Dixian Holder Thomas. It's a pleasure having you all here with us today. My group consists of Mr. Sheldon Gibbs, Mr. Leon Job, Mr. Kevin John, Mr. Clyde Haripasad, Mr. Roger Mohammed, Mr. Sion Jack, and yours truly, Dixian Holder Thomas. I'd like to spend a few minutes to introduce the following videos, which will provide an overview of Petrotrin Company. Thank you.
In 1857, the first well was drilled for oil in Trinidad, 61 meters deep in the vicinity of the Pitch Lake by the Merrimack Company. In 1908, commercial oil production began near the Pitch Lake in Labrie, and in 1910, the first export cargo of crude oil was shipped by tanker at Brighton, Labrie. Years later, in 1993, the Petroleum Company of Trinidad and Tobago Limited, otherwise known as Petrotrin, a local state-owned oil company, was established by the merger of Trintopec and Trintoc, two other state-owned oil companies. A third company, Trinmer Limited, was merged into the company in 2000. As a 100% government-owned state enterprise, Petrotrin was directly controlled by the Minister of Finance and the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, which was a line ministry that provided specialized technical analysis and statutory approvals for the company's operations.
The Oilfield Workers Trade Union, or OWTU, is one of Trinidad and Tobago's most significant trade unions. The union, which is currently managed by its president Ansel Roger, was established out of the 1937 labor riots. It was purportedly led by Tubal Uriah Butler, also known as Buzz, was actually organized by lawyer Adrian Cola Rienzi. The OWTU claims roughly 11,000 members. The union was founded on July 25, 1937 and was legally registered on September 15, 1937. The earliest meetings were held in Faizabad, and the first formal office was set up on Coffee Street in San Fernando. Upon research, there were no findings of the number of members the OWTU started with, but it must be honorably mentioned that Tubal Uriah Butler started the labor movement in Trinidad and Tobago. The OWTU has prioritized the protection of its members' and workers' interests by ensuring they negotiate the wages and working conditions, regulate relations between workers and employers, take collective action to enforce the terms of collective bargaining, develop additional demands on its members' behalf, ensure employees have a safe working environment, and provide its members with legal and financial services. Thank you. I now hand you over to Clyde.
Thank you, Kevin. I'll now present to you the industrial approach input-output model. Operating in the Petroleum Company of Trinidad and Tobago, Petrotrin, is a clear pluralist approach to industrial relations. The employees are represented by Oilfield Workers Trade Union, also called OWTU, which is quite powerful and can leverage their services due to its impact on the economy. What is evident is the relationship between the employer and worker. They both accept that conflict is inherent between them. Therefore, there is institutionalized consultation and representation on issues that impact the worker at almost every level. This allows for different and divergent views from both management and trade unions to reach a point of understanding which is achieved through negotiations, concessions, and compromise. The pluralistic approach to industrial relations reinforces the value and legitimacy of collective bargaining between management and trade unions as conflict resolving, which further serves to ensure smooth industrial relations. The union is integral to Petrotrin in matters of representation and is the only legal body that can represent workers in disciplinary matters, salary negotiations, etc. Therefore, the elements of a pluralistic approach is self-evident by the political acceptance and recognition in the imperfect labor market that exists in Trinidad and Tobago. This has concluded my contribution. I'll now hand you over to my esteemed colleague, Mr. Leon Joe.
following is a pest analysis showing the implications on Petrotrin and OWTU. Political. The political environment in Trinidad and Tobago promotes democracy. This democratic system enables the ideology of such a liberal collectivist superstructure which will impact the relationship between the government and Petrotrin as it relates to the collective bargaining process. Economic. Collective bargaining has had an impact on the ways in which salary increases are negotiated. With respect to market value comparisons, the OWTU would attempt to ensure that employees receive a fair wage and other benefits such as profit sharing. Given the fact that the earnings and incomes generated from Petrotrin were the major contributors to the country's gross domestic product, the OWTU found that greater equity should have been allocated to the employees instead of the salary cap of a 5% increase in the salary that was recommended by the government at the time of the negotiations. Social. Over the years, Petrotrin would have had a social and cultural impact on the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Petrotrin gave rise to several downstream industries and small businesses, which all benefited from social economic markets throughout Trinidad and Tobago. The OWTU believed that Petrotrin had a positive socio-economical impact on the national community and that workers should have been treated with greater respect. Technological. The use of technology in the negotiation process allowed for information to be transmitted to all members of society. When negotiators use technology to engage the public, a varying interest of stakeholders can be brought to their attention. OWTU attempted to scare the population by making announcements via media of strategic interruptions of supply of the country's gas stations, which resulted in panic buying and various fuel pumps throughout Trinidad and Tobago. This strategy would have helped the OWTU at the negotiating table, as the organized industrial actions would have forced the hand of the government by complying by virtue of hard bargaining process.
The relationship between the trade union and the government is that the Petroleum Company of Trinidad and Tobago, Limited Petrotrin, is a fully integrated oil company that was a major income earner for Trinidad and Tobago, to such an extent that the national budget was hinged on the price of oil. This fact directly relates to the production, and therefore any stoppages or interruption in workflow drastically impacted the revenues earned. OWTU, as a representative for the oil workers, stood as the vanguard to ensure that the employees of Petrotrin received their just reward for their contributions towards the overall benefit of the country. Any failure on the part of Petrotrin would have resulted in a major loss. However, the ability to produce oil at an acceptable level and quality that can be traded on the world market fell on the shoulders of the Petrotrin employee. In order to resolve their dispute, Petrotrin and the OWTU would have used a collective bargaining process of conjunctive distributive hard bargaining, in which both parties reach a final agreement as a result of coercion. The collective agreement was drafted and when discussions were effectively concluded. As in this case, the OWTU forced the government to accept their demands because of the strategy of forced disruptions in fuel supply. This is an example of a win-loss negotiation style, where one side benefits from competitive bargaining when the other party loses. I will now pass you on to my colleague.
In Industrial action is strictly regulated by the Industrial Relations Act. Industrial action by way of strike or lockout may only be taken in respect of unresolved interest disputes, and the Industrial Relations Act provides that only a recognized majority union may take strike action. The Oilfield Workers Trade Union motioned a 90-day strike plan of organized industrial action against Trinidad and Tobago State Oil Company, Petrotrin. The organized industrial action was scheduled to begin on 18th of February 2012 after Petrotrin refused to move above the 5% wage increase. The 2 weeks preceding the impending strike actions, citizens began panic buying fuel, fearing a fuel disruption.
No strike as yet, as the nation waits to hear whether an agreement has been reached with state-owned Petrotrin and the Oilfield Workers Trade Union.
The strike was averted on the 17th of February 2012 after marathon talks between the OWTU and Petrotrin. It was mediated by Labour Minister Errol McLeod, and it came to an agreement for the 5,000 oil workers with a 3-year deal which covered the negotiation period of 2008 to 2010.
The OWTU was successful at negotiating for better wages and allowances, but also made progress in getting Petrotrin to agree to fill all job vacancies within a 3-month period using the temporary workers employed at the company. The deal includes a 9% wage increase, following consolidation of all cost of living increases, and be allotted 1% in the first year, 2% the second year, and 6% for 2010. A 10% increase on allowances, including working heights, shift work, and excessive heat allowances. The payment of all severance and gratuity to temporary workers over the age of 55 will be made. The chairman of Petrotrin indicated that the package would cost the company $271 million, a figure far less than what would have been accrued if the strike action was allowed to take place. The Trinidad and Tobago budget is based on an anticipated price per barrel of oil. Due to fluctuations in demand and supply, the price of oil was lower than that expected by the Trinidad and Tobago government. This forced a deficit budget and also contributed to a negative outlook in relation to salary negotiations for all members of the population. In this regard, the following recommendations are identified. 1. International market prices must be considered and as a result be a contributing factor for both parties' consideration during negotiations. 2. Forecasting must be considered during negotiations to ensure sustainability of the company. In hindsight, this negotiation, though viewed as a success by the OWTU, would later contribute towards the demise of the organization in later years. 3. An independent international consultant service should be utilized to mediate this negotiating process. This entity should include political and economic analysts to bring forward the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats associated with the final decision. 4. State-owned businesses should be covered by some clause in the legislation to classify employees under these organizations as essential workers, so as to prevent unions from having the power exhibited by the OWTU to shut down the economy, thus limiting the style and type of industrial action that can be undertaken. This would result in the need for an association instead of a trade union. On behalf of the members of this group, we thank you.